Very disappointing for people in Melbourne to be heading into a hard lockdown, and really tough for the property industry as well, not just for real estate agents, not just for buying and selling property, but also for the construction industry. I think we do need to keep in mind that it is a 6-week lockdown and it's not a 6-year lockdown, so it is a short period of time. And when we have a look elsewhere in the world where we saw these hard lockdowns, if we look at New Zealand, we look at New York, the UK, who did have similar lockdowns, we have seen quite a sharp recovery following the end of it. So, you know, I think if you are in Melbourne, I think for people that are concerned about the outlook, we do need to keep in mind that, you know, this is necessary. We just need to live through it, and ideally we can keep consumer and business confidence intact enough to have a very sharp recovery.
And do you think our CBDs are going to survive COVID-19?
Look, at the moment, they are the most obviously impacted property market in Australia. We can see that not only has the office market been impacted, we're having the Property Council will release their vacancy rates this week. So we are expecting quite a sharp rise in vacancy. It will underestimate exactly what is happening with the office market. We've got a rising retail vacancy. There's a lot of apartments that are vacant at the moment, primarily because foreign students haven't returned. We don't have much of a tourism market at the moment, particularly in Melbourne. So, you know, Melbourne CBD in particular is looking like a ghost town. The future is, you know, a little bit uncertain. If we have a look at CBDs over the past 30 years, we can see that they have gone through stages of being very popular places to be. I think we will need to enact some sort of planning policy to get people back in there. It's probably similar to what we saw in the early 90s when the City of Melbourne implemented Postcode 3000 and really got people living there. But, you know, at this stage it is looking fairly dire, but, you know, we know that we can do things about it and get people back in there.
Yes, it will be interesting to see people working from home and the long-term ramifications of that as well. Could more local businesses do better, do you think, with that situation?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting. Shopping centres in suburban areas and regional areas are bouncing back. You know, obviously not in Melbourne at the moment or Victoria, but elsewhere in Australia, we are seeing greater levels of activity. So it is they are a beneficiary. A lot of local businesses in suburban areas are beneficiaries of people working from home. We also expect regional areas to do quite well. It's been quite interesting looking at search activity. We have seen incredible levels of search in places like northern New South Wales, places like Bangalore. Dural has seen a real uplift. If we go to Western Australia, that's southwest Western Australia, has seen lots of activity. So there's certainly a lot happening in the regional areas, and you know, whether that search will play out in terms of people moving, we don't know, but it certainly looks like it at the moment.
And as our cities grow, congestion and travel times have grown for some areas as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Infrastructure Australia released a report this week where they looked at the high priority projects for infrastructure. Infrastructure is obviously a big driver of house price growth. We did some work last week with News Corp looking across Australia at the suburbs that have seen the greatest price growth over the past 20 years. And what we found was that there were some areas where preferences had clearly changed. So beachside Sydney, for example, became far more popular. Inner west of Sydney, inner north of Melbourne became far more popular. But one of the other interesting things that came out was that areas where there has been very heavy investment in infrastructure, the suburbs also saw really good price growth. So the most obvious being the northwest of Sydney, where places like Seven Hills, Borkham Hills, you know, extending out to Kellyville, where we have seen some really big uplift in pricing as a result, partly of a lot of new development, but also a lot of infrastructure spending as well.
And the possibility of getting some larger homes as well, with people perhaps working and living at home. It might be very interesting to see the outcome with that situation.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, house and land is doing quite well at the moment. We are seeing quite strong demand, particularly in Sydney, actually. So it is partly because that was happening prior to COVID. You know, we were seeing this big uplift, but it could perhaps be driven by the fact that people are looking for space. If we do have a future of having to be working from home more or being at home more, then it does make your environment where you live quite a lot more important.
Yep, busy times indeed. Nerida Conisbee, Chief Economist at REA Group, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.